Good afternoon, all my fellow panelists. Mr. Yogesh Kalra, Head Global Business Creation, Galaxy Surfactants Limited. Mr. Radesh R. Welling, Managing Director, Naveen Fluorine International Limited. Mr. Anand Gopala Desikan, Managing Director, India and Vice President, Polymers, Asia, Wacker Cami, and Mr. Rupak Saraswat, Chief Executive Officer, India Glycols. So, Yogesh Kalra and Mr. Rupak Saraswat has been coming to our e-conferences and panel discussions regularly. We have two new faces, Mr. Radesh R. Welling, a very busy man trying to execute all the projects that he has got in hand. Recently also, he launched, he commissioned one of the factories. So, and there are many more to come in 2022 and further. Mr. Anand Gopala Desikan, it was very difficult for him to convince him, but finally he agreed to come on the platform. Many thanks, sir, for agreeing to be part of this NextGen Chemicals and Petrochemical Summit. And it's nice hosting you all on this wonderful first day and with specialty chemicals on fast track. Let me begin with the old hat, Mr. Rupak Saraswat. And my question to him is, market is booming. The demand is also there, and the potential is really high. So, what is it that needs to be done, or what is holding back that we are not able to take that leapfrog or that cheetah step? So, over to Mr. Rupak Saraswat.
Thank you, Praveen, for inviting me to talk on this topic. So let me first start with a bit of a disclaimer. You asked me as to what is holding back. So you have asked me to talk about gap areas. So I will take the liberty to be a little more critical, despite the fact that I am very bullish on India. And in order to make my point, maybe I may sound to be a little more critical. So when you look at what is holding us back, there are obviously two factors broadly, and at least two heads. One of them is what the country or the ecosystem is doing. And the second of them is what each company is doing or what the companies are doing. So I will talk more about individual companies. Generally we end up talking about what the country is doing, what the government should do, and so on and so forth. But let me get that out of the discussion a little earlier. So we all know that one of the big issues from the Indian perspective is that specialty chemicals are a base for excellence in so many areas. I need not count them here. But I believe that there isn't adequate recognition of that. We don't see the necessary planning for that. We don't see the necessary execution for that. For many years, you know it and I know it. For the last 10 years, I would have seen 30 white papers and orange papers and, and that papers ka silsila chala rehta hai, but nothing more happens. And what we have to really demonstrate as a demo piece, which is not that great an example, is the Hedge, which is still work in progress. So, that is from a point of view of action. We all know about the infrastructural issues, be it ports, be it transportation of chemicals and roads and so on, and environmental infrastructure. Another thing which I think is missing from an ecosystem or country perspective is we are yet to create a cohesive ecosystem. So if you look at it, for us to win, we need to have research, we need to have companies, we need to have policymakers, we need to have regulators work in tandem. So what it appears sometimes is, वो बॉलर एक अपनी स्ट्रेटजी से बॉलिंग कर रहे हैं, चार बैट्समैन अपनी स्ट्रेटजी से बॉलिंग कर रहे हैं, बैटिंग कर रहे हैं, फील्डर्स की अपनी स्ट्रेटजी है, कप्तान कौन है मालूम नहीं. Maybe that's the point I'm trying to make. So we have to create that cohesive system. So that's specific to a country. The other bit I'll come to is what should we as companies be doing? I think firstly, specialty chemicals, we all know and we talk about it again and again, is about creating knowledge on a sustained basis in terms of products, in terms of applications. And not only that, but regularly taking it forward. It's not that you made a mobile phone once off and you become a successful mobile phone company forever. So are we doing that well? So if you see how many products or application areas have we contributed to the world before we start immediately saying कि हम लोग जो है specialty chemicals में विश्व गुरु बन जाएंगे. So that's what something that we need to ponder upon. And quite often, if I'm as I said, I'm a little more critical this time. We get to make even specialty chemicals here, honestly, because we are a market and we are low cost. Now, then how is it different from commodity chemicals? Sand mining has the same rules which apply there. Now, if you look at Japan as an ecosystem for electronics, or Germany for automobiles or specialty chemicals, a number of these companies, it's not only about these factors. And I think we need to start talking about knowledge-based, creating that knowledge. So why doesn't that happen, in my view? And it's easy to talk, I understand. But then you invited me here to say, what's holding us back. I think we have a long way to go in terms of creating a culture of innovation. If you see, we are laggards there, we are reluctant there to invest and put our money where our mouth is in terms of innovation. The second thing is we have a long way to go in terms of excellence. So, the example that I sometimes give to people is that India has probably more ISO 9000 and whatever certificates than Japan does, but that's not made us better in terms of quality than Japan. I think that's something that we need to think of. And I think we are an evolving nation and society and an ecosystem. We need to, particularly when we're talking about knowledge-based, specialty chemicals, we need to get a little more long-term in terms of our thinking. So these are some of my broad thoughts on what I think as a country and as a set of companies is holding us back.
Rupak ji. Now I come to Mr. Radhesh R. Veli, Managing Director, Naveen Fluorine International Limited. Radhesh ji, if you can talk about there is a strong demand, export opportunities are the growth drivers. How do we encash? The big question. Over to you.
Yes. Yeah. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. Happy to be, part of this panel, which consists of such excellent other panelists. So thank you very much for inviting me. I think some of the things that Rupak talked about in terms of what is holding us, in terms of company-specific issues as well as industry-specific issues. One easy answer to your question is if you just flip these, they become opportunities, right? And those are the ones that we really need to kind of work on. But I think specifically, if you ask me in terms of what do we need to do to be able to encash this, at a macro level, what are we really doing, right? I mean, some of us are actually supplying products. Some of us are actually supplying services. Some of us are focused on import substitution. Some of us are focused on export markets or international markets. So it's almost like a 2x2 kind of a matrix, right? And everybody basically decides where to play and how to win. Now, and each of these sectors will have a different response. But let me talk about the one which kind of is close to our heart and where I see tremendous potential. I mean, not that there are dearth of opportunities in other quadrants, but the one that we see tremendous opportunity in is in terms of services. Services that we can offer, including research-based services, manufacturing services, etc. And there, it's almost, I feel, when I look at the industry, I almost feel that you can actually draw a parallel between where we are today and where, let's say, IT services were, maybe 2 decades back. I mean, if you look at IT services, the trigger was Y2K. For us, it was China plus one. I mean, that's the starting point, and then you can actually build up on that in terms of converting those opportunities to realities. But I think if you look at company specific, how do you actually really do that? I would probably put that into 3 buckets. One, I think it's very important to have a very clear point of view on where to play and how to win. I think, I see a lot of companies, especially in our sector, actually trying to approach it on a very tactical basis and having a business which is very inquiry led. I think that's not really going to help you grow significantly. I think so. So you need to be able to start with a very strong point of view on where to play, how to win. You need to also make a very clear assessment in terms of what is your play. Is it a technology arbitrage or is it a cost arbitrage play? And then you need to orient or structure your business systems accordingly. So the first point is having a clear point of view. The second one is developing set of capabilities accordingly. So the capabilities could be technology. Now technology, I'm combining chemistry plus engineering there, projects, operations, etc. So that it really helps you identify, convert, and then execute this set of opportunities that you can really go after. And the third one is scale. It's very critical that we really focus on the value chains that we really want to own. And then in those value chains, we really scale up our business so that we actually become the world's best in those value chains, so that the customers that we want to do business with, if they want to do anything in those value chains, upstream or downstream, they actually have to come to us. And that is how you build a business where there is a certain momentum effect which actually kicks in once you have a very strong base established. So I think that is how I would probably approach it. You start with that 2x2 kind of a matrix, decide where you want to play, and then have these specific 3 points. And I believe that one of the things that you actually asked earlier, what's holding us back? Today, if I look at the entire sector, I'm extremely encouraged with what I see happening in the sector. Because I feel that the next 10 plus years, I think there are going to be a lot of chemical companies coming out of India who will actually become $1 billion+ global organizations. So I think the time is really ripe for the Indian chemical industry.
And it's good to know that the next 10 years looks very bright, and a lot of what we can say large companies, global companies. So these Indian companies will become more global, both in terms of revenue and also in market cap. Thank you, sir. Now I come to Mr. Yogesh Kalra, Head of Global Business Creation, Galaxy Surfactants Limited. Yogesh, your foot is on both directions, global as well as India, because you have a very strong domestic demand and you are also focusing on exports in a big way. So what do you see are the growth drivers, and how do we see becoming large chemical companies in both in terms of market cap as well as in terms of revenue, so that we occupy the top 10, top 20, top 30 in the chemical globally? Over to Mr. Yogesh Kalra.
Hey, thank you, Praveen, and very good sunny welcome to one and all. Nice to see sun around outside despite the rains. In fact, talking about the India demand as well as the international opportunities, I will touch upon some softer aspects of first before I get into more specifics. What we have seen in the last couple of years, India has been placed very well in terms of as a country, in terms of stability, in terms of governance. Governance is improving in India. Things have changed rapidly in India. The best thing which India could do was a well-managed COVID. The way the country managed the COVID so well, it was an amazing task. At that scale, where India could do things exceptionally well and no one thought about it. It's a very big plus for the country as per se. And similarly, taking ahead, we have also managed very well international affairs globally in terms of relationship with various continents and countries. All these things happening in the last couple of years or maybe a decade or so has really put India on a global map. Earlier, India was positioned on a global map based on few of those guys, maybe the big industrial houses, or hardly anything was talked about Indian international market. I remember, I think 20 years back when I came into 30 years back, when I came into industry, export was not a big name. It was only for a couple of guys who had presence that they used to export. today, the best thing to happen is India is exceptionally placed in the global arena. And one of the big plus with India, which we have witnessed, especially during the COVID, the stability. The stability as a country today, we are seeing what's happening on our neighboring countries, what's happening in Europe, and the challenges in Latin America, etc., etc. So that gives me a humongous confidence in terms of the way we would be moving ahead in terms of our industry also, the chemicals. I remember 10 years back, chemical was not a great word, either in the industry or in the stock market or whatsoever. Today, everyone is talking about specialty chemicals, chemicals and specialty chemicals. And why that boom and the buoyancy is there. In fact, one of the important thing that has driven in terms of the chemical aspect, what I could see is that recently the resilience which the country has posed, when you see the global supply chain challenges, the way resilience, the compassion and hunger to contribute has led to a lot of entrepreneurial boom. The entrepreneurial thing has really accelerated very well in the last couple of years, which was missing suddenly in the last 5 years or 7 years. And India and Indians are known for capitalizing on opportunity. The moment we get an opportunity, we saw the way the world has reacted. In fact, when Rupak was talking about infrastructure challenges, etc., in fact, this COVID has exposed many developed nations in terms of the infrastructure capabilities. In fact, one of the most developed nations had a lot of challenges on managing ports, transportation, etc., etc. And despite all the challenges, I think whatever limitation as a country we have, I think we did exceptionally well in those challenges. So what is driving us in terms of, in fact, typically, if I have to a little bit more specific in the industry which we cater, Galaxy caters to home and personal care industry. And home and personal care industry, the end segment has been growing exceptionally well, not only in India, but outside India also. And what Indian industries contribute in terms of chemical is all the nature derived, the Ayurveda, the herbal, all those things have got fancies across the world. In fact, when you're talking about innovation and creation, what India is going to contribute as compared to what the petrochemical giants have contributed globally, I think India is bringing to the table the nature and the herbal and the Ayurveda concept along with its ingredients that goes into these markets. So suddenly, if you see, in fact, you travel across Europe or USA, you will see a lot of product based on these aspects. So these are the areas where, in fact, we are contributing exceptionally well. The domestic demand, because of the stability of the government, because of the stability the way country has put it across, people see upbeat in India as a country. The domestic demand definitely across segment, including chemical, is growing rapidly and fast. And of course, this is coupled with the typical challenges with China plus one issue has happened. The global guys want to de-risk and create more and more continents and countries and vendors. In fact, I was very surprised post the moment lockdown came down. A lot of international visitors visited our country and met a lot of our customers also, and a lot of chemical players also. All along before COVID, everyone was talking about China, India is nowhere, etc., etc. In last 2 years, they have realized a country which has resilience, which has compassion, which has hunger to contribute to entrepreneurial leadership will sustain and grow. We have been growing very slowly, but sustainably over a decade of time. And I think every industry, it could be an IT industry, when the service industry Rajesh talked about, got an opportunity, grew very well. It could be another industry. Today is a time, this era or this decade, the chemical industry is going exceptionally well. You take the name of any companies we have on the panelists, all are doing exceptionally well. And definitely the domestic demand in our sector is definitely up for a boom. We do not see any challenges in the domestic. Yes, there will be temporary hiccups. There will be challenges because of the inflation, because of the prices. I think those will get averaged out. And we see a very positive, robust things happening. And one of the important drivers, which India is talking very on sustainability. Sustain is the criteria which has taken the renewed vigor in terms of India market as well as international market. So we see both India and international market are doing pretty well in terms of these areas. And in fact, most of the companies in India had made an early forays in international market. In fact, we ventured into international markets about 2 decades ago. And today, those who have created a very good base are able to unlock the value. Further, there's a very good push from all the developed nations looking at India as an opportunity because they know what India brings to the table. And definitely, we are gearing up in terms of size, scale, innovation, creativity, and many of those fronts, which is opening. And last but not the least, in India, one of the good things that has happened is the UPI digital payments. amazing. Yeah, things are moving. I mean, I saw yesterday one of the big cement house, industrial house, talking about selling in the cement and all through e-commerce. So UPI e-commerce has actually opened the opportunities in India and taking us global in many other facets. So I'm extremely positive, extremely optimistic. The way we are going to grow, the way we're going to grow in terms of innovation, in terms of scale and size. It's a matter of time. Maybe we meet after 5 years or 7 years, 10 years. Things will be what today the service industry of technology is talking about.
Thank you, Yogesh, for depicting a bright future for the industry, and with your initial remarks, bright sunshine. So the same thing is applicable here also. Not only sun represent the sustainable part of it also, because we are seeing a lot of chemical companies going green by going for solar, or they are trying to reduce the carbon footprint with respect to the energy requirement. After having listened to all the, what we can say, Indian company representatives or their CEOs and MDs, now let us understand a German perspective. And we have with us Mr. Anand Gopala Desikan, Managing Director, India, and Vice President, Polymers Asia, Wacker Chemie. So your views, sir, on the very first point, how do the Germans look at India from the domestic demand that we are having and the export opportunities which Wacker Chemie can do it from manufacturing in India? So over to Mr. Anand Gopala Desikan.
Yeah. Praveen, many thanks for inviting. In fact, you made a big deal that I was difficult to approach. But if this panel is any indication, it's my regret I did not join earlier. So thanks a lot for inviting me, giving the opportunity to exchange thoughts with such an eminent panel and share with your audience. And one more thing I wanted to say is, while I work for a German company, I'm very strongly Indian and very strongly, bullish about Indian demand. I was just fortunate to work in many multinational companies, and Rupak also is one of my ex-colleagues. So I know Rupak well. Rupak has a very balanced perspective of all the topics. Coming to this, so I will share my perspective not so much as a German company, because in the past I worked in American multinationals as well. But before that, I just wanted to connect all the panelists' comment. I think Rupak's hand was forced to talk about the glass empty part of the glass, whereas others spoke more about the full part of the glass, which I think is a fair aspect of the Indian market. So when I have to summarize from a multinational perspective, and I have to say that, as a German company working in India, I am responsible for the polymers part, but we also have a very successful joint venture in silicons operating from Calcutta. So I will cover my perspective more from the polymer side. We are very confident about the demand. The growth story of India is very robust, very sustainable. And so on the demand side, I think India gets all the ticks, yeah, with a strong, big population and several other favorable factors, which I think Mr. Yogesh also mentioned about the ease of doing business is improved. A lot of the infrastructure of general business aspects is pretty strong, especially I think the service industry benefited a lot, the entrepreneurial spirit. So very bullish on India. We can see that happening in our customers and so on and so forth. Of course, India has a special challenge. When you ask me the question from a German company perspective, and I can only share because I'm part of the leadership team for our division. Definitely, India from demand point of view is very, very key. In fact, I would say every company is very keen to invest in India, but for certain factors, which I think some of which Rupak already highlighted. So from demand point of view, India gets all the ticks, and from the supply factors, I would say, where I think while there has been some improvement, the supply factors still there is a room to improve when we compare with our potential competitive countries who can also attract investment. There are some of the supply factors. I think Rupak broadly mentioned about infrastructure and so on, but also I would say one of the key ingredients is the intermediate chemicals, which are very much needed. I think is a big gap in India. I don't know about, Navin Fluorine or Galaxy, what their intermediates are, but at a broader level, if you look at all intermediates like acetic acid, acrylic acid, propylene oxide, it's an it's open secret that India is lacking a lot in this intermediate, even though there's a significant local demand. And Rupak referred about white paper, orange paper. Yes, a few years ago, McKinsey also said there was a need for 70 world-scale intermediate chemical plants of various kinds, in India. And we have not progressed much on this. So if we love our country, we should be able to praise and also criticize the aspects where we have to, improve. So I would say that on the supply factors, we could do more. I think the service industry got away because their requirement of these supply factors are not as hardware intensive as what we need in chemicals. So I think otherwise, from investment point of view, most multinational companies are ready to sign a check to put the investment in India, but some of the supply factors make them think a lot more than what they would do otherwise. And I agree with you. Everybody wants to have a diversity, not depending on one particular country, for example, China or so. So India is there, and also the know-how, and somewhere a part of it is also the cost aspect, but also the ability, the knowledge, capability of the Indian also is very well respected. And in fact, if you see most of the multinationals in even positions abroad, many Indians are finding to go global position to work, which also is actually a backhanded compliment that there are not such big opportunities happening in India due to the supply factors. On the demand side, I have no reason to worry. India will continue to grow, sometimes 7% GDP or 10% GDP, but it will grow. Despite of everything, it will grow. So very bullish on the demand side. Some question on supply side, but I guess that's also is improving. If you go 10 years back in some of those chemical conferences, I think some of the factors we were lamenting about, some of the factors are getting changed right now. So I guess things will be better. And of course, I also agree that in another 7-8 years is really a testing time for us, whether we close all these gaps, and then we are in for a very golden progress from there on. So those are my opening comments, Praveen.
So it's good to hear all the speakers for the first round, and everybody is bullish, and whatever infrastructure or intermediates, it takes time for all these to happen. So we cannot expect miracle to happen in a year or two. Definitely, if we are looking at a longer time frame, 2 years of COVID, I think at least we are not talking about China. That's the best part about it. And the government is also supporting the industry in a big way with the different policies that are coming. Now, let me come to the second point and reverse the order here. So my question to you, Mr. Anand Gopala Desikan, is if you can talk about, you gave a bit of a flavor by saying that intermediates is a problem, or the supply side is improving, whereas the demand side is bullish. So keeping that into the background, wanted to know, sir, how manufacturing of raw materials will be taken care or should be taken care so that the shortages and the rising input cost is being taken care, because that will continue, because it's a global village. And when you are in a global village, and if there is a war-like situation, you can't do anything. Though our Prime Minister took some steps by what we can through indirect channel to get the oil from both Iran as well as Russia, which has what we can say. Here it is all about intelligence. It is all about knowledge and working out the modalities, because everybody has to face all these problems. So we have to work out the modalities which helps us. So your view, sir, how do we, what I'm trying to, you put up the problem, I'm asking the solution also from you, sir.
Yeah.
To Mr. Anand Gopala Desikan.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I think when we see the big challenge on the supply factors and what I would call as the infrastructure or the intermediates question, I think there should be a lot more collaboration between multinational companies and companies which are already on the ground, because I think they have unlocked some part of the puzzles. I would say more from the operating in a infrastructure challenged environment, but still be successful, running safe and successful operations. So there should be a lot of knowledge sharing. And of course, one cannot underestimate the need for intermediates. Intermediates is a pan-industry issue. I mean, if you just look at China, there are certain strong public sector companies in China which produce a lot of these intermediates. So I think there is definitely, because some of the intermediates are high capital intensive, sometimes very proprietary technology oriented. So therefore, there needs to be a very strong will to collaborate with Indian companies, and also strong will from the government to earmark some part of the feedstock that can be dedicated to specialty chemicals, especially. Otherwise, what will happen is, if only the big players are playing, they like to convert into commodities. It's a lot easier business to do. Export also easier. So I would say that it's a lot more collaboration required between multinational Indian companies, of course, who have potential synergies, areas of overlap. And of course, there should be a strong government will to, even if possible, for example, a company from the government which can take care of, from the cracker, a few intermediates, and then, supply certain quantity to the industry. It can be EO, PO, acrylic acid, acetic acid, wherever. And also, it's not easy. So on the challenge side, also some of the technology is with multinational companies. So they also need to be assured that their investments get a fair return from what their global shareholders demand, right? I mean, so there are certain challenges, which of course the multinational company and people like me, in my roles have to facilitate, the expectation of the global companies, and also the challenges, unique challenges of India. And these are some very high level, thoughts. I would just leave it right now, but we can go around the panel. And if I come across something very specific, I would definitely share with the team again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I come to Rajesh, and the question remains same for him. Manufacturing raw materials to manage shortages and rising input cost. Over to Rajesh.
Yeah, I think when I think about this particular topic in terms of how do you better manage your input cost, specifically from the point of view of raw materials, I would actually divide the set of solutions into two buckets. One is more of a short-term tactical solution. Second is more of a strategic mid to long-term solution. From the tactical perspective, obviously the strategic long-term solution is going to be a lot more important for the future of our business. But if you purely just look at it from the tactical short-term solution point of view, I think the first thing that it's extremely important for us all to build in the organization is to bring in that agility, to identify and implement initiatives very quickly. Some of the initiatives could be in form of partnerships that Anand talked about, or could actually develop some possible tollers, etc. And how quickly we are able to identify those opportunities and more importantly, implement those. But according to me, the more important one would be the strategic solutions. And there, as I briefly touched upon earlier, I think really what is important is to take a value chain approach. Especially if you look at your business and say, okay, which are the value chains that I play in? Let's assume that there are 3 or 4 strategic value chains that you are currently playing in, and you want to grow your business in. So the question I think each of us needs to ask ourselves is, how do I really own the value chain? Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to do everything in that value chain, and that is where the partnership, etc., comes in. But how do you really own at least the choke points? For example, how do you actually have your own building blocks so that you are not dependent on other country, like for example China, etc., in the long term? Because otherwise, what's going to happen is to your customers, you seem to be offering a risk mitigation option, but again, for your raw material or your raw materials, if you're dependent on China, it is not a true risk mitigation option. So, I would say selection of the right value chain, and then have an approach of owning the value chains by owning the choke points, and also by focusing on the building blocks. Once you do that, I think it's very important that in those specific value chains, you really build international scale, so that some of these things around cost, etc., input cost from the utility point of view, etc., also can be taken care of. And the approach that our company has been following in this regards is that we ask ourselves a very simple question: in whatever we are doing, would we have ability to sell into China tomorrow? So if the answer is convincingly yes, then that means that you really have a world-class position, both from the technology perspective as well as from the cost perspective. So I think that is basically been our thought process around managing cost, on tactical side as well as on the strategic side.
Thank you, Rajesh. Hello. So now I come to Yogesh ji, and the question to him would be with respect to capacity addition and process improvement and innovation. So how do we become, say, world class or world scale? Because that is the thing that presently we are in the mid-end segment, and if we are planning to scale upwards. So how do we do that?
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. In fact, one of the strong areas which is emerging in the last couple of years, which we are seeing in the country as well as more specific, I again re-emphasize and emphasize the focus on renewed sustainability. India is definitely looked as a very renewed, important, sustainable partner, not only from the as a country perspective. Again, in fact, I'll just touch upon a little bit from where Rajesh Willing was talking about. How do we take it up in terms of the raw material cost? Today, despite I know overnight, we cannot build overnight intermediates and raw materials. But where would these developing countries or the countries which have source of intermediates and raw material park there? In the last couple of years, the face of India has changed so in a positive way. They have to park their intermediates also. So today, India is one of the important destinations for the global suppliers. They may have material, but if they don't park, where do they park? So India has become a very important destination till the time we become self-sufficient or we create our own intermediates. See, everything we cannot produce and sell. So you have to be dependent on a collaboration and partnership. So India is the destination where the good supply partners are looking to partner with India. There was a decade when India used to go and approach them. Today, things are a bit changing. They are coming to India to partner with us, and this we have witnessed in across industry. So coming from there, the important area where we are definitely seeing the capacity additions happening on three important areas. One, when you talk about innovation, innovation has to be based on one, performance. And as rightly Rajesh talked about, if you are able to supply in China, then definitely you are there in terms of your positioning. So one, the capacity addition is happening through innovation on performance, and secondly, that performance has to have affordability. If it cannot have an affordability, it is just a dream. And then, of course, coupled with sustaining. So there's a triangle in terms of innovation based on performance, affordability, and sustainability. How do you go about process improvements in terms of you are the best in the world class? And I think there are various tools which have been adopted by most of the manufacturing organizations across in the chemical sector. A tool called TPM or Six Sigma and all those here. Apart from, of course, ISO we talked about initially was just a other aspect. But yes, definitely, if you have to be competitive, you have to go for very good international tools like TPM, etc. Innovation, and I can vouch for it. The country, when I talked about sustainability, is my favorite topic. People in India, and more so, we are looking at more green process chemistry based on nature-derived and nature-derived ingredients. We are tapping alternative substitutes. We're coming out with alternative ingredients. That's what is putting investment in capexes. And definitely, organizations are looking at zero liquid discharge. Extremely important in terms of the pollution control norms. We are looking water positive, and the best part is science-based targets, SBTI. So definitely the end segment in India and outside is growing. Definitely capexes are coming into place. There are new entrants which are entering in these areas. So definitely we see capital addition, capacity addition happening in a very good way, both in the end growth industry where we are catering to it, and also in our own sector. So pretty positive in terms of the way capexes are being planned and phased out.
Rupak ji, the same question I'm also posing you with respect to manufacturing raw materials to manage shortages and rising input cost. So over to Mr. Rupak Saraswat.
Yeah, first of all, I heard all my panelists. It was good learning, and I am in complete agreement. And thank you for showing the sunny side, so to say, in terms of how the opportunities are. And on a lighter note, as you said, Anand, for the German perspective, which Anand immediately tried to emphasize that he's Indian, and he'll also give us an Indian perspective. I like that bit. And, it's been a few things got talked about, which Radesh mentioned, Anand mentioned, and Yogesh also mentioned, in terms of the need for scale, the need for affordability, and the need for making the intermediates and so on. And it crossed my mind that if this country, like the policymakers, Anand make the point that in China, some of the public sector enterprises have actually stepped in to fill in the gaps in terms of intermediates and so on. And I was thinking that the government did think about a few areas where they focused on driving Atmanirbhar Bharat, so to say. I think just think about, for example, the toys industry. It's completely revolutionized. I'm said that, from a very small percentage being made in India to a big percentage being made in India now. You think about cell phones, I'm told the number is similar, from a very tiny percentage to 90+% being made in India. Similarly happening in the defense industry. So I think there is hope and optimism that if the government and the policymakers and the industry come together, we've really achieved miracles. Somebody talked about the role of how well India has done in the digital space, and absolutely correct. And it's something that's going to help us leapfrog. The digital payments, for example, I do not know how many of you have seen that video from India's, in the last few years, came up from being a tiny bar to growing above all the bars in terms of digital payments, far many times China and US. That's very interesting. I think we've made great progress, and that's possible. And, people have, honestly, Praveen, people have spoken about raw materials and scale and what we need to do to sort out the raw material and the intermediate issues. If you allow me, I will talk a little bit about, therefore, where the future opportunities for the industry lie, if that's correct. Somewhat related, but not entirely. So one of the things is that we need to recognize. Is that okay?
Rupak, the last point is about new and emerging areas. So anyway, we will talk about that.
Okay. So definitely, I think there is a clear need that for us to excel in these industries, be it the personal care industries, be it the pharma industry, be it the crop care industry, we need to feed this population, be it the construction industry. There is tremendous need for not only end-use chemicals, but the intermediates which go into this. I think that needs to be recognized. And to some extent, that push has started after this serious thinking about China Plus One. And I am told that we've made reasonable success so far already in terms of intermediates for crop care, in terms of intermediates for pharma. And as more informed panelists here will tell you, I'm sure, Radesh, that actually that is one of the reasons which is also pushing up the performance of the specialty chemicals or the intermediates and performance chemicals industry in India. I think the factors which will help us bridge that gap, honestly, have been well covered by my panelists, whether it is scale, whether it is affordability, whether it is innovation, and the fact that we need to sort out infrastructure, and some of the things that I talked about. So in general, I have nothing more to add than that in terms of what we need to build, bridge the intermediate gaps. Some of them I've repeated, some I've added in this part of the discussion.
Thank you. We are come to the end of the second round. The third round is all about focus on new and emerging areas. And this is very important because there are a lot of industries which are going, which are transitioning. One is the automobile industry, which is moving from internal combustion engine to the EV or the hydrogen moving forward. That's one aspect. Then with the single-use plastic, there is and I think presently it is limited to few things, but later on, I think we will also have some more things to be added in that what we can say, not to be used list. Plus the energy requirements are also changing because of focus on sustainability. Then if we talk about Galaxy surfactants, the consumer part, they are also trying to shift more from fossil-based to say the plant-based kind of a thing because of allergy or perception to allergy. And people feel that plant or is more akin to our health or more beneficial to our health. So keeping all these into factors, I just wanted to draw all these things in front of you all. With these into factors, wanted to understand from all our 4 speakers, starting with Rupak ji, what should be the focus and the new emerging areas, knowing the fact that everybody is jumping into it. So first of all, we have to create the niche, we have to create a brand India, and we have to also scale up faster so that we are able to encash both on the domestic demand as well as on international exports. So over to Mr. Rupak Saraswat.
Thank you, Praveen. First of all, we've looked at the opportunity, the unique needs and aspirations of India and the world. And the chemical industry, the knowledge-based process industry, probably will have in the coming decades the most exciting time. And I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Way back in the 40s and the 50s, this very chemical industry gave us a large number of molecules which give us convenience in life. You all know that, I need not count it, from plastics to fabrics to fibers, so many things. And by the time we hit the 90s and a few years into our working lives, we started to feel that, it's the IT industry and the computer industry, which is the sunrise industry, and we are part of a sunset industry, so to say, if I may. However, we've had some big changes being recognized. They were always there, which is going to drive innovation in this industry. Some companies are going to really perform well, but which will also mean that ones who do not keep pace are going to fall behind. And the drivers for future opportunities, specifically from an Indian perspective, but largely from a global perspective, we are a connected world actually. So there has to be a connect. One of them is really very often spoken about, and I'm still going to repeat it, is the real challenge of sustainability. I don't think there has been ever a bigger challenge in the history of mankind than what we face today. If I may kind of repeat more or less what the Secretary General of United Nations said, he said, we are rapidly heading towards irreversible, uncontrollable, radical change if we do not do something about it right now. And I'm not quoting an NGO. I'm not quoting just one person who's passionate about it. I think this is something that we need to think about, which means that these very products or these functionalities of ours which are served by a kind of products and a kind of processes are going to still be there, but they must be done through different products or products which are made using different processes. That there is no choice, which means there will be a second wave of innovation. And therefore, we'll have to look at it that way, not about, we got the recipe from somewhere and we got a plant from somewhere. That's not how we'll become leaders. We may continue to earn our bread and butter, but that's different. And the second thing that we talked about here, which is going to drive radical change, is technology, digital technologies, and many others like biotech and so on. And the process industry will be influenced by both of these hugely. And the third factor is the unique needs of India, the challenges of India, the opportunities of India. We recently had a debate that, there is a view that next year we may actually have the distinction of being the most populated nation in the world with, 14+% or 15+% population and roughly 3% land. So that's a big challenge. We need water, we need food, we need to take care of the environment, we need to feed these wonderful and talented young people, we need energy, we need housing, we need health. This will drive opportunities for many industries, but more so for the process industry and the chemicals industry and the specialty chemical industry, which is so critical to meet these requirements, but do it leveraging technologies and the sustainability factor that I talked about. So what it means is, what is going to throw open opportunities for us? I think in the relatively shorter term, people here in this panel are already working in these organizations which are taking that forward, which is knowledge-based products and innovation, which is, for example, industry in India, which India particularly is very well suited to cater to, the pharma industry, for example, and the pharma value chain. I like the fact about deciding a few strategic value chains, not only from a company perspective, from a country perspective. Agrochemicals, for example, or personal care, for example, or automotive, for example, or textiles, people will forever continue to wear clothes, or construction, for example. So this will present a tremendous opportunity given those three factors. And the second one, slightly medium term, but they are all overlapping and acting together, is sustainable products, is greener products, is safer products, is use of biotechnology. And the third, but a little longer term, is our ability to enable the circular economy. Giving green products is not circular economy, or a very small part of the circular economy. The bigger part of the circular economy is when we'll probably own no assets. If you've got a Dell laptop, for example, because there's one in front of me, everything from this laptop must go back. And therefore, the way it is assembled, the way it is taken back, and that supply chain will probably be more complex than the supply chain of putting it together. Electrical vehicle batteries, for example. So unless we've got the ecosystem to address the recycling of the metals will go into the batteries from nickel, cobalt, lithium, and so on, it's a non-starter. So many of these industries will need to head towards circular economy, and that I think will provide a lot of opportunities for India, for us to innovate, for us to have that knowledge-based place in the value-creating chemical industry for future and present as well.
Thank you, sir. Now the same question I would be asking Mr. Yogesh Kalra. So what are the new and emerging areas that your customer is wanting, sir, both in the consumer space?
In fact, we have been seeing very interesting and rapid changes in the offerings in home and personal care. Typically, again, I'll move to sustainable offerings. The customers are looking at sustainable offerings. And let me tell you, the new generation, the age group of 14 to 20 or 21, the Gen Z or Gen Y, they're extremely passionately sustainability driven. They're very careful. Rather than the product, they're reading the ingredients in that product and how those ingredients are made. There's a sustainable route, cruelty-free, plant-based, etc. So they have become extremely knowledgeable. Knowledge is now easily available. So what are we looking at for our customers? Of course, definitely, which we are there in terms of green chemistry. What India and what our company and country are looking at patented molecules, which was not there a couple of years back or decades back. Today, India talks with pride in terms of its patenting, in terms of its green chemistry. The area which is extremely important is waterless. How you can reduce water in your process. You give a better high concentrate offerings, waterless offerings, plasticless offerings. I'll give you a quick example. Earlier days in 1930s, our great grandmother or grandmother used to use bar soaps and bar cakes and everything. Let me tell you, there was an era which moved from bar to liquid to plastic, shampoo bottled in a plastic, or you had all liquid soaps, hand soaps. Today, we are looking at concentrates. The companies, the end consumer, the customers are giving concentrates. So you buy a small concentrate, go home and dilute in your bottle. So you take care of all the sustainable environment also. That's a concentrate concept which is catching up very well. Today, we are moving back to bars, solid bars. People want shampoo not in a liquid form or in a bottle form. They're ready to experience shampoo in a bar form, shampoo bar conditioning, so that you do away with water, you do away with liquid, you do away with plastic. So these are the concepts which are catching up very well in terms of concentrates, whether it be a floor cleaner, or whether it be a hand wash, or whether it be a shower gel. Everything people want sustainable, and that can happen to concentrate. So concentrates are coming back in an interesting way. That's innovation. People are looking at unit doses. People are looking at non-toxic preservations. Preservative is one important area which was not focused very much a decade ago. Today, people want to look at non-toxic preservatives in your formulations. People want to look at milder surfactants, milder chemicals. You cannot do away 100% with the nature or nature derived, but definitely they're looking at high percent of naturality index. People look at Ayurveda, people looking herbal. So these are the trends which are driving the home and personal care industry. The way the automobile industry is being driven by electrical vehicle, the home and personal care industry is driven by sustainability, green offerings, waterless, plasticless, milder surfactant, concentrate, solid bar. And one of the important new areas which is emerging, all these things are positioned through a lovely concept of e-commerce. So two new areas are emerging, which is emerging. One is the sustainability offerings, and the channel for this is e-commerce guys. So this is what I will have to sum it up, Praveen.
Sir, an additional question to you is why chemical companies are not adopting e-commerce? I'm not talking about the say.
I think you have started it. The beginning is already made, Praveen. In fact, the beginning is already being made on those lines. And sooner in next couple of years, you'll see those things increasing for sure. In fact, 2 days back, I read about the cement company, Aditya Birla Group, keeping aside 2,000 crore for e-commerce distribution of building materials. So it's a matter of time. You will see that. Maybe in the next session, we'll discuss on that also.
Thank you, sir. Now I come to Rajesh Wellingji. Sir, in your industry, how do you see what are the new focus and new emerging areas? Obviously, we are looking at green gases is what the demand is. But how green are these green gases? That's the big question. And how are you trying to create demand both in India and outside India? Over to Mr. Rajesh.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I think when you look at new areas, we tend to actually categorize them into 3 buckets. New to us as a company, new to India, and then new to the world. And obviously the approach, strategy, etc. will be different for different segments. For example, when you're talking about new to you, so you might be in a crop science and you're trying to move into life science. So that's basically new to you. New to India would be something like semiconductor. So, especially if you are playing in the semiconductor fabrication space, there are a lot of molecules that we are currently developing to supply into that particular space. But when you truly talk about emerging areas, I think you're primarily talking about new to the world. So, for example, for us, it would be something like energy storage battery. So that's really new for the world, and we don't play in cathode or anode, but everything else we actually are able to supply, or there is a potential for us to develop and supply in terms of battery chemicals. I think if you look at the specialty chemical segment, at least the specific segments that we play in, I think the biggest challenge for us is that if you look at that value chain, we really play upstream in that value chain. So though there could be a significant demand increase for the end application or from the end consumer, if the rest of the ecosystem doesn't really develop, you're not going to be benefited. So I'll give you an example. In this drive for decarbonization and transition towards the solar energy, we clearly see a lot of capacity being built up on the solar side. But it doesn't really necessarily impact us, because our customer is not a company which is actually setting up this solar capacity. Our customer is someone who is actually going to be manufacturing solar cells and solar panels. So if the end customer continues to import solar cell and panel, it doesn't really help our space, because we really play upstream in the market. Similarly to certain with respect to the energy storage solution. So I think it's very important that that entire ecosystem really needs to be developed for us to be able to, for us to succeed. Therefore, it's very critical that you need to identify and develop right partnerships. Some of these partnerships could be with other value chain partners. So for example, if you're talking about energy storage solutions, would be with companies like, let's say, Samsung, etc. or some of the European companies who are trying to develop solutions in those areas, or it could be partnerships with the end customer. And how do you really offer the solution to the end customer in terms of specifically solution related to, let's say, either additive or binder, etc. I think other thing is that it's very critical that you choose a playing field which is independent of a specific technology option finally chosen. Because the play that we have, it's very difficult for us to influence. So, for example, if you talk about battery chemical, would let's say 10 years down the line, what would be the mainstay? Would that be lithium-ion battery? Would that be sodium battery? Would that be fuel cell? We don't know, and we really cannot really influence as a specialty chemical company. So the starting point and the playing field that you choose should be independent of that technology. So there has to be a very clear starting point, which basically has a strong synergy to what you do. For us, it's fluorine chemistry. At the same time, it's very important for us to be able to understand and develop application capabilities. If you look at most of the Indian companies, probably some of the companies like Wacker, etc., would be slightly different, but most of the Indian companies have been extremely good on product-based innovation and process-based innovation, but have not been tremendously successful on the application-based innovation. So I think that's a significant departure from what we have been traditionally good at and the kind of capability we'll require to succeed in some of these emerging segments. So I think that would be my response to identification of some of these emerging segments to play in or to focus on, and how do you really develop your play for those specific segments that you choose to play in. And I think one important factor there is, though we actually have been talking about India demand, etc., given the fact that you're basically again having a value chain approach, from day one, you need to adopt a global approach. So, for example, in some of these emerging segments that we have decided to play in, we are not restricting ourselves to India as a playing field. We are saying that if you're talking about, let's say, batteries, energy storage solutions, we want to be a supplier into this particular space for the world, not only for India.
Thank you, sir. I think we have got all different perspective from all the speakers, and I think Anandji will also add a different perspective. So his views on focus on new and emerging areas. So over to Anand.
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. I think my earlier panelists have very well covered, all the opportunities. I mean, there was something about, the change in the industry, the sustainability. So I'd like to conclude by just to adding that when I sit and also I think Radesh last mentioned that when you look for these new opportunities, you look at a global perspective. I think I really support that, because some of these new developments like sustainability, and especially Europe, is getting quite big. Sometimes our internal leadership meetings, sometimes the topic they talk about sustainability look very far from from what we are doing in India. So there are probably the innovators, and if you are aligned with the innovators, then I think we can, get ready for the future success as well. Having said that, I also have, just to, like sometime back, Radesh said, this is a litmus test, is you have to operate in China, and that's when, you know that you are right. I also want to highlight in these new areas, when you look at sustainability, especially the UN sustainability targets, if they are grouped into economic, social, and environmental. Sometimes I tell our global colleagues that the mature countries have it easy because they've solved the economic problem before, they've solved the social problem before, they can only work on the environmental problem now. Whereas smart companies or the future winning companies in India will solve all the three problems together almost at the same time, and when and if they do that, I think they will be really the world champions. So, and I can see, I think from the talk, which I heard from Rupak, Yogesh, and Radesh, I think the companies, Indian companies, are thinking in those lines. And that's how truly companies aspiring for global leadership should do, and so would other multinational in other countries also. So if sitting in India, we can solve economic, social, and environment problems at the same time with our products, with our solution, with our business models, then you have to be a world beater. So there's no other way. So with that, I just wanted to conclude, my last chance for summary, and back to you, Praveen.
I think it was really interesting, sir, moderating this session where we got different perspectives, and all the 3 rounds were both interesting, absorbing, and also more in terms of gaining knowledge. I believe my industry delegates who are listening to this specialty chemicals on fast track, we have all the ingredients, and I think as Rupakji talked about, it needs support of all. And as he rightly said, if you want to win a match, the wicketkeeper also has to do his job. The fielder has also to do his job. The batsman has also to do the job. And if the umpire here means the government, and if the government and the umpire are neutral, I think we will win the race. And there is no looking back from what Yogesh talked about. The clouds have cleared. The sun is bright. It's only need time for the chlorophyll, or for what we can say, to become a fruit. With that, I come to the end of this session. Many thanks to all my speakers. Mr. Yogesh Kalra, Head Global Business Creation, Galaxy Surfactants. Mr. Radesh R. Welling, Managing Director, Naveen Fluorine International Limited. Mr. Anand Gopala Desikan, Managing Director, India and Vice President, Polymers Asia, Wacker Chemi. And Mr. Rupak Saraswat, Chief Executive Officer, India Glycols Limited. Once again, sir, many thanks. And definitely my hard work of getting all of you on this platform, I hope it would have been very beneficial for all our delegates. Many thanks, sir. Thank you.